Hello, this is Dr. Jen, the Intuitive Phoenix, here to talk to you about loving boundaries. Putting boundaries in place lets other people know how to treat you. You've probably heard the saying that we teach others how to treat us. So if we're being treated poorly, it's typically because we have taught them how to do just that. And to make a change, especially like at this point in my life, I have to decide that boundaries are necessary. And that's the first step. We've got to decide that we've got an issue here that we don't want to continue. So we've got to decide to put a boundary in place. And then we have to communicate that boundary. And we can feel really great and really empowered when we decide, like, okay, I'm putting this boundary in place. We feel strong, we feel confident. And then we go, oh shit, now I have to communicate it. And how do I communicate it? Because for some people, the boundary we want to communicate is somebody that we really like and somebody that we really love. And we don't want to hurt their feelings and we don't want to get them upset. And yet, because we're not sharing what we want to share, communicating our boundary, often we are the ones that get hurt, that are upset, that are stressed, that are tense, and it can go on from there. So it is loving. It is loving, it is loving, it is loving for us to decide what boundaries are necessary for us, to communicate those in a loving, clear way, and then we have to follow through. Often people get stuck with, oh, now I have to communicate it. And so they put it off and they think, well, maybe it'll just work out on its own, or I hope it just gets better. And because they wait, that strength and that motivation and that feeling of empowerment starts to fizzle. And it starts to fizzle until something else occurs where you're like, oh, I got to put that boundary in place. And often that cycle can be repeated again and again and again until we just get pissed off. And then it ends up being a crazy mess. We get angry, they get angry, people get hurt, and all of that may have been avoided if we followed through on communicating the boundary that we decided was loving to ourselves and to them. So yes, we've got to decide, and then yes, we've got to communicate it. And one of the practices that I recommend to people is write down your boundaries. Because in some cases, when we're talking to somebody, there's actually more than one boundary we have to put in place. And when we're calm, when we're cool, when we're collected, when we're present in our body, that is the time to make these decisions around boundaries. And put them in writing for yourself, especially if this is new. I have a client that I'm working with who is putting boundaries in place for somebody that she's known for over 25 years. Somebody that now she's empowering herself, and this is all new and it feels really big and really scary at times. So she wrote down her boundaries, and now before she communicates with that person, she's going to review her boundaries. Remind herself what those boundaries are and know that they're loving for herself. It makes it easier for her to follow through on them. Now, one of the reasons I'm deciding to do this talk today is because I had a current client, another client, say, hey, I showed up really big for myself. I made this decision that this client who continues to waste my time, continues to get frustrated with me about how she's constantly changing the schedule and not following through, that I'm not taking that responsibility anymore. And that I've made some decisions that this won't continue, and I've wrapped it up and nice, neat bow, and that feels really, really good. And when I asked, well, have you communicated it? No, I have not yet. There is no reason for us to currently be communicating, so I'm not going to chase that down, but I know that this is the boundary I have to put in place. At which point I recommended that they practice what they will say when this person or somebody else then questions the boundary that is necessary to be put in place. Again, because it's loving for me and loving for them. And practice, what I mean by practice is imagine that person contacting you who you have to communicate this boundary with. And imagine what they might say and what you might say. Talk it out loud. Hear yourself and how does it sound? Try a few different ways to approach it. So that way you become more comfortable in communicating that boundary, and you can determine if it's the best way for you to proceed, or if a different tact may be more beneficial for you and for that person. In addition to that, it helps relieve our stress over, what do we say when they contact us? Instead of it being running around in our head, which can get us all worked up and stressed and tense, the practice actually has us getting in our body. We can take breaks, we can try again. I don't know about you, but I've had those situations where I've communicated with somebody by just going in and going, okay, I need to do this. And then I walk away and go, oh, I could have handled that better. Or, if I just would have thought to say this, that would have been a much better way to handle it. So by practicing, we work through all of those kinks and all of those oh shits and all of those, yeah, I didn't handle that the best. And it increases the likelihood and the probability that when we actually speak to them, that we are going to feel empowered for ourselves, that some of the anger that we might have been feeling that gave us that motivation to say, okay, a boundary is necessary, has already been addressed. And by doing that, now the way we communicate with them is in a much more relaxed state. It doesn't come across as angry and, they just hear us versus hearing and feeling the anger, and then the words get lost in that communication. I hope that's making sense. If anybody has any questions or comments about this, either as I'm speaking about it now or after you've watched it, feel free to post them. I will get back to you and respond to that. So now we've made the decision for the boundary. We've communicated, or we've practiced communicating that boundary. Again, practice is key because it gets us out of our head. It allows us to work through any emotion, anger, aggravation, frustration that we might be feeling. So that way we're not communicating that aspect necessarily, or at least not in your face kind of way. We can show it much better for ourselves and for that other person. And also it creates neural pathways for when we actually do it, for us to more easily step into doing it in a way that when we look back at it when we're done going, hey, you know what? Yeah, that wasn't the easiest thing to do. I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I handled that really well. So that's really important to create those neural pathways. Of course, one of the last things is actually communicating it. And two, when that person then tries to push past that boundary or overstep that boundary, it's really important that we hold that boundary, which is why I mentioned earlier, have a list of your boundaries. Put them somewhere that you can easily access. I love Google Drive. I can access it on my phone, my iPad, my laptop, the desktop, wherever, because I want to be able to revisit that until it becomes part of me. I can move it from, trying to remember it up here and own it within my body. I can actually embody that. It makes it more easy. That wasn't very well said. It makes it easier to hold that boundary for us, that we don't get caught off guard and we don't find ourselves waffling. And then when we're not communicating that with that person anymore, going, oh shit, like I did it again. I kicked myself and didn't take care of myself. Keep this information handy. If you've watched any of my other videos, I use lists. I have Post-it notes on my desk because I want to remember these things, not in my head, but I want to embody them. I want to know them without having to be thinking on the spot, because, hey, our brain doesn't always work like that when we're stressed, when we're tense, when we have something really important to communicate. Last thing, use accountability. Share your boundary with somebody that you can trust, somebody who can help you hold that space. Somebody like me. It might be a professional. I have a lot of clients that is part of the service that I provide, is I help hold the space for them. And I have no attachment to their situation or to the other person. I am holding space for them to be able to follow through on boundaries that they've decided for themselves. Again, if you've got questions, comments, you want to know more about this, I would love to hear from you. And if you want to be able to decide and implement and follow through on boundaries and you're struggling with that, shoot me a message and we can get a call and figure out how to lovingly create and hold boundaries. All right, I'm sending health and love and ease to you all in your transformation. Until we talk again, I'll talk to you later. Bye.